cargo did get in to Gaza. In fact, almost all of the cargo from all of the ships has now arrived in Gaza, with the exception of the cement and building materials. These are the things that Israel's not allowing. The wheelchairs, the hearing aids, all this other stuff has gotten in through the tireless efforts of some of our volunteers and through the good efforts of the UN to help get the material in. The cement, again, has not arrived. The Rachel Corrie ship was out at sea. It had been sabotaged before it left Ireland, and that's why it was delayed from joining the rest of the flotillas. It was supposed to be part of the whole thing and part of sailing at the same time. But because of the damage it suffered to, I think, the propeller or the shaft or something underneath the ship, it had to be repaired before it could join. So it was delayed in getting there. In the aftermath of the flotilla, we were all consumed with dealing with the crisis situation of what happened. And for the first 36 hours, pretty much, we didn't know how many people were killed, we didn't know who was killed, we didn't know who was injured. Just for example, for me, I mean, from the moment that the ships were attacked just about and word got out, I started being inundated with emails, phone calls from media to give interviews, to talk about what happened at a point where I still didn't have much information. And on top of just the general work that I'm responsible for doing for Free Gaza, my wife was on board the ship, and I didn't know what happened to her for about 40 hours. So for all, and while this is a huge mission, and there are many volunteers around the world who've helped us, when it came to the immediate aftermath of the attack on the ship, there were only three of us doing media work. And we were completely overwhelmed. We trying to get information and all that. The Rachel Corrie ship also, as it was sailing, we lost communication with it. The radio stopped working. We couldn't get in touch with the people on board most of the time, because as long as they were far enough away from the coast, cell phones didn't work. They were they knew that something had happened to the flotilla. They didn't know the full extent of what had happened, but they knew that they had to try to keep, as safe as possible while continuing towards Gaza. At one point, we did try to have the boat turn around, and we preemptively announced in the media that it was going to turn around when we probably shouldn't have. In the end, it kept going. The people on board the ship offered the same kind of resistance that people on other ships also offered. They didn't pick up anything to fight, but you got to remember the Israelis, when they took the Rachel Corrie, did so in a much different way. I don't even think, I think maybe only a couple of the soldiers who climbed on board actually had weapons, instead of all of the soldiers having weapons on board. So, they knew that the media, they actually, I think, brought their own media with them, the Israelis. I think they brought, camera people to film from their side what they were doing. So it was staged very carefully. Of course, this is after the big incident with the rest of the ships. They knew that the world's attention was focused on what was going to happen with the Rachel Corrie. So the way that was handled, obviously, even the way they were taken off the ship, they were escorted off the ship instead of being forced off the ship, the passengers. It was all done for the Israeli media and to try to rehabilitate Israel's image. So, in retrospect, we probably would have handled that whole ship differently, but in retrospect, we would have also had more people, ready and awake to deal with the crisis situation. We would have tried to have a better way of getting more information, although that also would have been really hard to do in that circumstance. So it's a failure to some extent on our part, but it's also, the Israeli stage managed the whole taking of the Rachel Corrie very carefully as well.
You have the last question.
All right. It seems like you've been pretty dismissive overall of Israel's security concerns, which is a bit surprising to me. I was hoping that maybe you could just spend a little bit of time just talking about Israel's security concerns, namely the thousands of rockets that have been fired from Gaza into the surrounding towns, and their claim that that is the reason for the continued blockade of Gaza, and their concerns about weapons and other munitions being shipped into Gaza and then used to attack Israeli civilians. I just think that in having a legitimate discussion on the subject, it's important to also seriously consider Israel's security concerns.
I wholly agree with you, and I wish Israel would have a legitimate discussion on the subject. Because let's look at what Israel has done, and let's look at what the statements have been. The argument there's the argument about Israel's security concerns, and then there's the issue of these ships and Israel's security concerns. And they're two separate things. Israel has legitimate security concerns about Gaza, about the West Bank. We just saw a killing of 2 Israeli settlers in the West Bank the other day. There's concerns certainly from Lebanon. There's concerns from Syria to some extent. There's concerns from Iran, of course. Israel has, like any country, security concerns. There's no doubt about that. Now, the question about our ships is a different discussion about security. And as I said before, as I pointed out, our ships are inspected by EU inspectors. Everything is checked. All the passengers are checked. So, if we want to have a discussion about the security concerns about these ships, and I'm not talking about any ship coming with weapons, I'm talking about our ships that are inspected. Yes, Israel, if there was a mysterious ship that came out of nowhere and was trying to approach Gaza, and very likely or very possibly could have weapons, I have no argument with Israel having the right to inspect those ships. Our ships were inspected. Our ships were inspected by the same regime, that inspection regime that inspects cargo ships that go to Israel. So, if we want to have a security discussion, we can have one, but we have to have one about the specifics of what we're talking about here. Furthermore, these claims about rockets getting into Israel, being imported into Israel, in the aftermath of the flotilla, Netanyahu said in defending the blockade that hundreds of thousands of rockets from Iran and elsewhere have gotten into Gaza. I mean, the incongruity of this statement couldn't be more blatant. On the one hand, he's trying to defend the blockade, and on the other hand, he's admitting that it doesn't work. Because if hundreds of thousands of rockets got in there, then the blockade doesn't work. The fact is that there aren't hundreds of thousands of rockets in Gaza that have been imported. All the rockets that have been fired into Israel are homemade rockets made in Gaza from loose material all around. The UN inspectors, after the Operation Cast Lead, who were called in to clean up all the unexploded ordnance, both in Gaza and in Israel, came out and gave like a display of all the rockets and all the materials they found. And you could see the kinds of rockets that Hamas is making. I'm not saying this to minimize the threat, but I'm saying that these aren't sophisticated weapons that are being imported. These are homemade rockets that are being manufactured in Gaza. And Israel does have a security concern about those. It has a security concern, if it wants, about potential imported rockets. But they're not on our ships. And we proved that they're not on our ships. So, yes, we can have a discussion about security concerns. I do agree that there are serious security concerns Israel faces. But they don't have security concerns from our ships. And if the argument about the blockade is about preventing weapons, well, we're proving that we don't have weapons, so there's no argument to block our ships from getting into Gaza. Furthermore, there's no rationale, according to those security concerns, for preventing Palestinian students from leaving. There's no security concerns for preventing Palestinians who need medical attention and treatment from leaving. And this is why it's collective punishment and not security.
All right. Well, thanks, Adam. That concludes tonight's event. Again, if you're interested in joining Sky, please see either Jen or myself after the event. And thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.